All right, this is going to be hopefully a quick-ish video where I just run through a bunch of tips for tanking. I know some people in this game that I usually play with are starting to try out tanking, and I wanted to make something hopefully concise that just says, here's some things that are really useful to know. I'm going to start by shotgunning out, just rapid fire a bunch of more basic tips, and then I'll get to some things that are useful tips, but they kind of rely on you having more tanking experience. The best way to describe this is Hell Let Loose, being good at the game, is mostly about game knowledge, map knowledge, and a lot of these tips rely on having that knowledge at a higher level. So hopefully, hearing it now will be something subconsciously that you think about when you play, and then you start developing those kind of skills. That not necessarily muscle memory, but it's more of like internal timing, for example, for a number of these. But anyways, I'll get right into it. Um, so this isn't going to be the tank Bible, by the way. I'm not going to tell you, for example, HE shells do more damage to light armor, so when shooting recon tanks or the backs of light tanks shoots HE. I'm not going to go through the tank Bible. I'm not going to tell you everything or very weird specific things like that again. That's not this video. It's just tips. So first off, um, pretty basic. You should get practice in every single position of the tank. I'm guilty of just trying to live in the driver's seat of the tank every match because I love it. But if you don't spend any time in other positions, you don't understand how the actions you take uh, affect those people in the other positions. Specifically, if you never spend any time in the gunner seat, you're never going to understand how certain things you're going to do as a driver will affect the gunner and their ability to aim or get a shot off. If you always spend time in the spotter and never drive, you're not going to know, oh, what we can and can't drive through this break in the hedge, or it's going to be a lot easier for you to give better like driving instructions and other stuff. For example, there's a lot more to it, but I'm not going to keep rambling. When communicating with your driver as a spotter and you're telling them to turn, it's really important to say front right, front left, or ass right, ass left. Um, because it can get confusing when you say turn right, back us up, whatever. Be very specific. Turn the back of the tank to the left. Um, People just say ass right, ass left because it's a little bit faster to say, and as crude as it is, it just works. Um, this one is very important. You need to learn what you can and can't drive through in the tank. Honestly, the driver has the most going on out of the tank crew. And there's just the most things to learn. But knowing what you can and can't drive through, which you only get from just tanking a lot and driving a lot, will have a massive impact on the routes that you take, and being able to get weird flanks and sneaks, and just it has a very big impact when you have a good driver who knows every single object in the level that can and can't be driven through. It makes a huge impact. And then lastly, for the basics, landmines, look out for them on roads, look out for them on intersections. Try not to use roads if you don't have to. Um, and the last very basic thing is when you get in the tank, whatever you're holding in your hand, in whatever position, whether that's crouch, standing, or laying down, is going to be how you exit the tank. So the main thing here is most people who are high level tankers, a lot of them will get in their tank laying down, and you either get in with your gun in your hand if you're playing on a map where satchels are a worry, so not foy. If you're worried about being satcheled on the map that you're playing more than you are about stopping somewhere to repair, you want to get in with a gun. If you're playing on a big open map like Foy or Kursk, where the chances of you being snuck up on are very low and you don't think it's really going to happen, maybe get in with the repair tool so you can start fixing faster while you back up behind some kind of cover kind of thing. Um, but yeah, and again, laying down just so when you get out, you're a smaller target, you're on the floor. People might not see you jump out if there's bushes in the way or grass. And then if there's a satchel guy, they're probably going to be waiting for you to jump out and aiming their gun at chest height to just gun you down. If you get out and you're on the floor, that's half a second where they go, oh, whoa, whoa, and they have to like adjust their aim and look down, and that might give you a chance. So now we're going to get into the more higher level stuff, things that are something that just come with a little more time in the game. The main thing is when you kill an enemy tank, you need to start a timer in the back of your head. It seems very basic and dumb to say this, but you kind of forget in the moment when you're immersed in the game, you're shooting and oh, look at the infantry, whatever. But the second you kill the enemy tank, they're going to spawn. They're going to ask for probably a heavy tank if they know what they're doing and they got the fuel. And then they're going to drive it back to whatever point of the map is currently being contested. They're going to drive back to the middle point. They're going to drive it back to where you killed them. And they're going to take probably the basic routes that most people take. And if you've tanked a lot, you've taken those routes as well. So the second you kill, and for example, if it's a medium on medium fight at the start of the match, the second you kill that medium, start a little timer in the back of your head. And after you kill them, you can go ahead and shoot infantry, have fun, use that HE and whatever. And after about a minute or two, you should go, okay, we killed them a minute and a half ago. They've probably got their heavy tank by now, and they've most likely are driving out of spawn. These are the spots they might show up. This is around the time they should show up. We should probably move. And then you can move your tank into a position to either cut them off, get an ambush, get a side shot. But you don't want to just sit there and wait for them to come to you. That's you kill them, you're not going to stay exactly where you killed them. That's not the best idea. Some maps that's kind of unavoidable, curse in the windmills, but generally you want to move after a little bit of time after killing the enemy tank. Um, and knowing how many tanks other teams have, where they are, is incredibly important, and that's mostly you yelling at squad chat to mark tanks for you. Command chat, I mean. Here's another one related to timing, real quick. Is rockets take about 6 seconds to reload, aim, and fire. So if you're in fourth gear and you're cruising, and all of a sudden you take an AT rocket to the back, and you're like, "Holy shit!" and you don't want to flip a 180 and turn around and start fighting them, you're like, "I'm not going to stay here. This is dangerous. We need to keep going." One of those situations. There's no friendly infantry here. If we turn around to fight them, there's just going to be more AT guys or more whatever. If you're planning on running, start counting to 6 after that first rocket is shot, and then add whatever that lead time was for that rocket hitting you, the travel time, depending on how far away they are. That's going to be longer or shorter, but start counting to 6. When you get around 5-6 seconds, swerve violently to the left, to the right, whatever. You're either going to make them miss their second rocket, because if they're far away, that aiming reticle is not going to be on you. It's going to be above you, and it's going to be hard for them to see you maneuvering, especially if you're wiggling everywhere. So yeah, around 6 seconds, 5 seconds, swerve violently if you're running away from AT, for example, and you could probably make a miss because, again, it's hard for them to adjust when they're aiming down the sights. And that's right about that time it takes for them to shoot. Here's another basic one. When you're in a parked position somewhere, most of the time you're going to want to be in reverse gear. Essentially, most tanks turn faster in reverse than they do in first gear. So if you're parked somewhere, you probably want to be in reverse gear so you can react to anti-tank sneaking up on you or spotting an enemy tank somewhere needing to turn your tank towards them faster than if you're in first. First, you can use if there's cover in front of you. If you're working with cover, you use whatever gear is going to make you be able to get in that cover faster, whether it's first or reverse, whatever. But generally speaking, you want to be in reverse so you can turn quicker and react quicker. If you do turn, for example, for AT sneaking up on you and you start turning the back of your tank to the left, you want to say gunner turn gun right. You want the gun of the tank to turn into whatever direction you're flipping that tank if you're responding to AT sneaking up on you. So if you take an AT shot from the right and you're flipping the tank to look at it, turn gun right. That way they can get a shot off while you're turning and then center it back once you're facing that threat. I've already talked about knowing what you can and can't drive through. There's also things you can and can't drive over. And there's some things in maps that you can only drive over in diagonal. Some things you can only go over, like berms, in first or second or third gear. And again, that angle, whether it's front on or diagonal, will affect that too. So something to know. Know the common routes that people like to take and avoid them yourselves and use them to ambush enemy tanks. That's pretty basic. That also is a big part of knowing what you can and can't drive through and where you can and can't drive. So if you go over a berm that you have to go into first gear to go over, but no one ever takes it, it might be useful. That kind of thing. Here's another basic tip that most people don't know unless someone just randomly tells them, and that has to do with track damage. If your tracks are 100% damaged, you're not going to be able to drive faster than first gear, and your tank's going to sound awful. The thing that a lot of people don't know is you don't need to fully repair them to be able to drive in fourth gear again to go at max speed. You just need to jump out, spend literally 1 second with the repair torch on the tracks, and as long as you have a percentage of that 100% health bar, doesn't matter if it's 1%, 5%, 10%, as long as it's not zero in red, you can drive in fourth gear, max gear. Um, so if you need to leave and your tracks are damaged, have someone jump out, hit it for 1 second, then leave. Don't stay around to repair them fully unless you're somewhere far away from getting jumped by infantry or tanks or anything, and you can afford to take that time to fully repair it. So that's one little other tip. Um, as a driver, sometimes you want to be in third gear. Your tank's going to be bouncing a lot less. For your gunner, it's going to be easier for them to get a shot and a move. So if you know there's an enemy tank nearby, like you know they're close, you heard their cannon shooting, or you got marks, and it's like it's within a square of you, you might want to drop it into third and try to stay on flat ground as flat as possible to give your gunner a chance to get that shot on the move. So I'm very much a proponent of sometimes dropping in third instead of going in fourth. How you stop the tank, again, this goes to the whole every position thing. How you stop the tank is going to very greatly affect the gunner and the spotter, mostly the gunner. So if you slam on the brakes and hit reverse, that the barrel of your tank is going to dip directly into the ground, then straight up in the sky, and then down. Sometimes you don't need to do that. Sometimes you can just slowly shift down the gears or brake, tap the brakes, and just come to a smooth, gradual stop. If you're on flat ground and the enemy is close to you, for say example, they drive in front of you and they give you their side or something, you usually don't want to slam the brakes. You want to come to a gradual stop so you can get that shot on the move and then reload. And by the time you reload, your second shot's good and you're stopped. So sometimes you want that smooth, slow stop as opposed to a hard brake and then changing the tank from there. Um, some more basic stuff. Everyone in the tank can see everything that shows up on recon on the map. So not just the tank commander or the not just the tank commander. Everyone in the tank can see recon flares, planes, that kind of thing. Something to know. German rockets can pen the front of medium tanks. Um, American bazookas cannot. So something to think about. The German medium tank you can be a little more aggressive with, if as long as you keep your front towards infantry. Turrets turn faster the more zoomed out they are. So if you're a gunner, that's a very important thing to know. That's why you want to kind of be zoomed out until you're engaging, and then only zoom in when you get your reticle close to the enemy tank that you're looking at. You should. Here's another one that's something that people don't think about, but is very, very important. Using your ears is incredibly important. A very specific tip that I would say definitely separates good tankers from average tankers, and that is using your ears. We're all nerds here. We all have surround sound, whatever headsets. Like, oh, I can hear everything. Use that because you can't just identify tanks by looking at them. You can identify them by sound. And sometimes you play a game where you're not getting tank marks. Your squad leads are bad or they're brand new or low level or whatever, and they don't know how to mark tanks and they're not doing it. You can hear an enemy tank shoot. So sometimes you can identify if you're driving and you hear a cannon shoot to your left, open your map. There's no friendly tanks to your left. Close your map. And then based off of the sound of that cannon firing, you can guesstimate what you're going to deal with. You can say, like, that sounded big. There's a heavy tank somewhere to the north of us. It sounds close. It sounds far away. So using your ears and saying, hey, it sounds like there's a tank over there. Just listen for the sound of tank cannons. Guess what direction it's coming from. Let your crew know in squad chat, hey guys, I heard a tank. It sounds like there's a heavy tank that way. And then you guys can plan and act and react accordingly. So using your ears to hear on enemy tanks to find out where they are, and then what kind of tank. Is that a recon? Is that a heavy? That kind of thing. Very important. Um, kind of related to that too, if you're shooting your big old cannon, the other tanks on the enemy team are going to hear that. And if they're good, they're going to be doing exactly what I just said. They're going to be listening and they're going to hear your big old cannon shooting and use that to try to guess where exactly it's coming from. Same thing with shooting tracers, either from the turret or the bow machine gun. The machine guns have tracers. So if you're shooting long distance with those things, other people on the other team are going to see those tracers flying through breaks in hedges or breaks in buildings or down roads or whatever, and that's another thing that gives you away. Um, so just something to know. I have a couple other tips here that are just way too way too specific and dumb. So I'm going to just hit the last one here. How to use HE as a gunner. You don't want to shoot people directly as the gunner. If you're using HE to fire at infantry, you want to try to hit things next to the infantry you're shooting. Hit the walls next to them, the trees next to them, the ground next to them, the buildings. If you hit a guy directly, it's funny because that dude just ate a tank shell. I'm sure we've all seen that gif that went viral of like a cannon hitting a gel dummy. But if you shoot the ground next to Larry, it might blow up Bob and Jeff to his right that you didn't even see because they were behind a wall or a bush. I've had instances where the enemies are spawning behind a hedge, and we can kill them behind the hedge, but we don't want to push into it because we're afraid of AT, and we can't hit the spawn because there's a hedge and a berm in the way. But there's a tree behind the hedge, and you can shoot the top. You can shoot the top of that tree or the trunk of that tree over the hedge with HE, and the splash will splash it down and hit the outpost, and it'll hit the dudes. Um, Rail crossing on Carentan, people build garrisons inside that point that's all surrounded by walls. So as a tank, it's sketchy. If you get close, you're going to get swarmed by AT, and if you're far away, you're not going to do much unless people run out in front of you. But you can hit HE off the crane, HE off the buildings, HE off the electrical poles. You can splash HE off of all sorts of bits and bobs sticking up over those walls slightly, and that splash from the HE will start killing those garrisons, killing those outposts. More importantly, any map with one of those giant large barns. Think dugout on Foy. Think, is it barn on SMDM or SM Dumont, one of those. San Maria Glise has a big old barn, cattle sheds, for example. Those big barns have open windows in the top, and you can shoot HE all the way at the very top of the building. Where the roof meets the walls, there's windows at the top of that building. If you put HE through the top of those windows and hit the support beams in there, you're going to be sniping a lot of Garys. Churches, the big old church on the map, HE through the windows. If they build garrisons inside, it'll kill them. Town center in Carrington, there's a backyard that everyone always loves to build a garrison in because there's not a lot of cover anywhere else by town center, to be honest. You can take a tank, take it down that alleyway there, shoot the back of that building once with HE, it will kill those Garys. So be creative with your HE. Try to use splash to the most effect that you can. You don't have to hit things directly, just hit near anything remotely and wait for that splash to do its effect. The bigger the gun, the bigger the splash as well. All right, I just remembered 3 additional little tips that I forgot to put in before, so I'm going to just shoot this out real quick, and then the video is going to end. Sorry, it was just random background footage. I'm not a YouTuber, I don't do this. I always forget to hit record when I play, even if I feel like it, and I'm too lazy to edit. But anyways, here's these final tips. If you ever see infantry that are marking you, communicate that to your crew and know you should probably think about moving. When I say they're marking you, if you see enemy infantry and they're specifically aiming down their sights with their gun and looking at the tank, that's them pinging you If they're a random squatty, or if they're a squad leader, that could be them dropping a tank mark on you. So if you see people aiming down the sides of their gun at their tank, just assume that you're now a marked tank. There is a mark above your head. You should probably move because the enemy tanks are going to be looking that way or coming that way. Um, Here's one thing that I forgot to mention when I was talking about the gunner and the driver and how those things affect each other. As a driver, you will always want to try to keep the tank on as flat of ground as possible. The longer the distance your gunner needs to shoot, the more drastic the effect not being on flat ground is going to be for them. On some maps like Kharkov, Kursk, Foy, where you're shooting like 10 billion miles away, this is very noticeable. If you're in the middle of a city and someone's 10 feet away, it doesn't really matter. But just remember, the farther away you are from what you're shooting and what you're doing, the flatter ground you want to be on when you're either parked or driving, it doesn't matter. Being on flat ground, having the tank flat is just very, very useful to that gunner. And this last little tip is try not to sit somewhere too long. I already said if you're being marked by infantry, it's probably like a hey, we should probably move. But if you just sit there for long enough, you might be marked just because there's people you can't see who are marking you. If you sit somewhere too long, people are going to notice and say, hey, there's a tank that's been sitting at this one spot for 5 minutes, whatever. If you sit somewhere too long, they can use a precision strike to kill you. The enemy tanks can go on a flank to try to get around where you're at, and enemy AT can sneak up. If you're sitting somewhere long enough, you're being marked. If you're being marked, you're in danger. Um, the last game I played with a buddy of mine, we did pretty good, and I'd say like 2 out of the 5 deaths we had, I'm pretty sure like a minute or so before we died, we said we've been sitting here too long. We should probably move, and then we didn't move. And lo and behold, half a minute, like a minute and a half later, an infantry squad came out of nowhere and were behind us, and we got satcheled, or we got hit by AT rockets, or an enemy heavy came around the corner because we'd been there for a while. We were probably marked, and lo and behold, we were. So yeah, if you're sitting somewhere for a while and you start hearing, this comes with just playing the game a lot. If you start getting that little feeling like, hey, we should move. We've been here a bit. You should probably listen to that. But anyways, thanks for watching this, and hopefully it was useful.